I did not cry that day. That is what surprises me the most when I think back on it. I should have cried. Any normal person would have. But instead, I smiled and nodded my head and said nothing. Because in that moment, I finally understood something I had been feeling for a long time. I was still family, just not important enough to be asked. That realization did not come all at once. It did not come with shouting or fighting or harsh words. It came quietly, the way some truths do, like a door closing softly behind you, so softly that no one else notices you are locked out. I remember standing in my own kitchen, holding a cup of tea that had already gone cold. The house was full of voices that day. My son's voice, my daughter-in-law's voice. Even my grandchildren were laughing in the other room, and yet I felt completely alone. I was standing there listening when I heard my name, not spoken to me, spoken about me. That was when I realized something had already been decided, and I was the last one to know. If you had met me years ago, you would have said I was lucky. A husband, children, a home filled with noise and life. I believed that too. I believed that being quiet meant being strong, that giving space meant being loving, that trusting your family meant they would always trust you back. I was wrong. But let me start from the beginning so you understand how I got here. When my son got married, I told myself one thing over and over again. Do not interfere. Do not become the kind of mother-in-law people complain about. I had seen it happen to other women. They lost their sons not because they were cruel, but because they were too present. So I stepped back. I smiled when they made decisions without me. I waited to be invited. I told myself that silence was respect. My daughter-in-law was polite, always polite. She called me auntie even after the wedding, never Ami. At first I thought that was sweet. Later I understood what it meant. We lived under the same roof for some time, a shared house, shared meals, shared walls, but not shared conversations. Plans were made at the dinner table, and I learned about them later, sometimes days later, sometimes weeks. We thought you knew, my son would say, and I would smile and say, of course, because what else could I say? I told myself I was imagining things, that this was just how families changed, that children grew up, that mothers learned to step aside. But stepping aside turned into being invisible. I would hear them talking in low voices in the evenings. When I entered the room, the conversation would stop. Not suddenly, not awkwardly, just gently, as if I wasn't meant to hear it anyway. I remember one night in particular. It was raining outside, the kind of rain that makes the house feel smaller. I was folding laundry in my room when I heard my son say, "We'll tell her after it's final." I stood still. My hand stopped moving. The rain grew louder. Tell me what? After what was final? I waited. No one came to tell me anything. Days passed, then weeks. Then one afternoon, everything changed. They sat me down in the living room, both of them, side by side. My son spoke carefully, like someone choosing words from a list. "We've decided something," he said. Decided, not discussed, not considered, not talked about, decided. I listened as they explained plans that affected my life, my space, my future, and all I could think was this: when did I stop being part of we? I nodded, I smiled, I said I understood, because I did understand. I understood that this conversation was not the beginning, it was the ending. That night I lay awake in my bed, listening to the house breathe around me. The ticking clock, the distant hum of traffic, the quiet laughter from another room. I felt like a guest in the place where I had spent years building a life. And the hardest part was this: no one meant to hurt me. They just forgot to include me. In the next part, I will tell you how small moments added up, how silence became distance, and how love can still exist even when respect slowly disappears. Because sometimes the deepest pain doesn't come from cruelty, it comes from being overlooked by the people you gave everything to. At first, nothing felt broken. At least, that is what I told myself. Life in our family went on the same way it always had. Morning tea, quiet afternoons, short phone calls that ended with, "We'll talk later." But something had changed. I just didn't know when it happened. I remember standing in my kitchen one afternoon, washing the same cup twice because my mind was somewhere else. I felt it in the silence, the kind of silence that is not peaceful, just empty. No one had said anything to hurt me. That was the strange part. There were no arguments, no angry words, just distance. My son used to call me every evening, not for long, sometimes just 2 minutes. "How was your day, Ammi? Did you eat?" Now days passed without a call. When I called him, he sounded rushed. "I'll call you later," he would say. Later never came. I told myself he was busy. Work, family, life. I had once been young too, I understood. Or at least I thought I did. Family dinners started changing. I noticed it slowly. Plans were made, but I heard about them late, sometimes from someone else. "Oh, you didn't come yesterday?" a relative asked casually. "We thought you were busy." I smiled. I always smiled. "Oh yes," I said. "I had some work." That was a lie, but it felt easier than asking why no one had told me. One evening, I went to my daughter-in-law's house with a small container of food. It was something I used to do often. When she opened the door, she looked surprised. Not happy, just surprised. "Oh, you came," she said. That one sentence stayed with me. Not, "I'm glad you came," just, "Oh, you came." Inside, everyone was sitting together, talking, laughing. The room felt full, but somehow there was no space for me. I sat quietly. No one asked me how I was. They talked about plans, future plans. And that is when I heard it. "We've already decided," my son said casually. "We'll handle it this way." Decided what? I looked up, listened carefully. They were talking about something important, something that affected the family, something that affected me. But no one looked at me. No one paused. No one explained. It was like I wasn't there. I wanted to speak. I really did. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. What if I misunderstood? What if it wasn't my place anymore? So I stayed quiet. That night, I walked home slowly. The road felt longer than usual. I kept asking myself the same question. When did I stop being part of the conversation? Small moments began to hurt more than big ones. Family group chats were active, messages came and went. Sometimes I replied, sometimes no one responded. Photos were shared, events, smiles. I saw pictures of gatherings I had not been invited to. I stared at my phone for a long time, then locked the screen. I told myself not to feel hurt, but feelings don't listen to logic. One day, I overheard something by accident. I was visiting my sister when my phone rang. It was my son. I answered happily.
But he sounded confused. "Oh, I thought I was calling my wife," he said. There was a pause, voices in the background. He lowered his voice. "We already talked about this," he said to someone near him. "She doesn't need to know yet." My heart skipped. Doesn't need to know what? Before I could ask, the call ended. That night, sleep did not come easily. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. My thoughts ran in circles. Was something wrong? Was someone sick? Were they planning something? And why was I not supposed to know? I remembered all the times I had been there for them. Late nights, early mornings, sacrifices no one had asked me to make. I had done them willingly, with love. So why did I suddenly feel like a stranger? I tried to brush it off. The next morning, I made tea and told myself I was overthinking. But the feeling followed me. At the market, at home, even during prayer. Something important was happening without me. I could feel it. A few days later, my neighbor said something that broke my calm. "Oh, congratulations," she smiled. "For what?" I asked, confused. She looked surprised. "Oh, I thought you knew," she said. "About the decision your family made. Everyone's talking about it." My hands trembled. "What decision?" I asked softly. Her smile faded. "Oh, I thought you knew," she said quickly. But she hadn't. I could see it in her eyes. That was the moment doubt turned into pain. I walked back home slowly. Each step felt heavy. Inside my house, the walls felt too empty. I sat down and looked at my hands. Hands that had worked for this family. Hands that had held everyone together. And now, these same hands were left out. I didn't want to accuse anyone. I didn't want to create drama. So I did what I had always done. I stayed silent. But silence has a cost, and I was starting to pay it. I began replaying old conversations in my head. Times when my opinions were brushed aside. Times when decisions were already made before I spoke. I remembered laughing it off back then. "They're young," I used to say. "They know better now." But maybe they had stopped seeing me as part of the family a long time ago. One evening, I finally asked a gentle question. We were sitting together. The television was on, but no one was watching. I took a deep breath. "Is there something I should know?" I asked softly. The room went quiet. Too quiet. My daughter-in-law looked at my son. My son looked away. "No," he said quickly. "Why would you think that?" I nodded. "Oh," I said, "just asking." But my heart knew. That was not the truth. That night I cried quietly. Not loudly, not in anger, just soft tears that soaked into my pillow. I wasn't angry with them. I was grieving something else. The feeling of belonging. I realized then that the hardest pain is not being rejected, it is being ignored, being treated like you are no longer important enough to be asked. And somewhere deep inside, I knew the truth was coming. I just didn't know how much it would change me.
There are moments in life when the truth does not arrive loudly. It does not knock on the door. It simply walks in and sits beside you. This was one of those moments. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. No special date, no warning. I was folding clothes in my room when my phone rang. It was my sister. Her voice sounded careful, too careful. "Are you sitting down?" she asked. I smiled softly. "I'm fine," I said. "What is it?" There was a pause. Then she spoke. "I thought you already knew," she said, "but maybe no one told you." My hand stopped moving. "Told me what?" I asked. She took a deep breath. "They're selling the old house," she said. "The one you helped pay for. The one you said you wanted to keep." The room felt smaller. "What?" I whispered. She continued slowly, like she was choosing each word. "They've already signed papers. They decided months ago." Months? I sat down on the edge of the bed. "They said you agreed," she added quietly. Agreed? I had never been asked. My chest felt tight, like something heavy was resting on it. "Who decided?" I asked, though I already knew. "Your son," she said, "and his wife, together." I closed my eyes. That house was not just walls and rooms. It held memories. It held my life. And they had decided to let it go without me. I thanked my sister and ended the call. Then I sat there in silence. No tears came at first, just shock. I replayed the past months in my head, the rushed calls, the quiet conversations, the things I didn't need to know. This was it. This was what they had been hiding. That evening, I went to their house, not angry, not loud, just tired. When I walked in, they both looked surprised. "You're here?" my daughter-in-law asked. I nodded. "Yes," I said softly. "I need to talk." They exchanged a look. That look told me everything. We sat down. For a moment, no one spoke. Then I asked the question I had been holding inside for weeks. Why wasn't I told? Why wasn't I asked? My son looked uncomfortable. "We didn't want to stress you," he said quickly. "You worry too much." I smiled sadly. "So you decided for me?" I asked. Silence. My daughter-in-law spoke next. "We thought it was better this way. You would have said no." I looked at her. "Maybe I would have," I said, "but it was still my right to speak." She looked away. My son finally met my eyes. "We didn't think it mattered anymore," he said quietly. "We thought you'd understand." That sentence broke something inside me. Didn't matter anymore? Not me, my voice, my feelings, my place. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just asked one question. When did I stop being part of this family? No one answered. That was when I understood. They didn't mean to hurt me, but they had already moved on. They had made a new circle, and I was standing outside it. I stood up slowly. "I wish you had trusted me enough to ask," I said. "That's all." Then I walked out. That night I sat alone in my house, the same house that once felt full. Now it felt honest. The truth hurt, but it also cleared something inside me. I finally knew where I stood. I cried that night, not because of the house, not because of the decision. I cried because I realized something painful. Love can exist and still leave you out. I thought of all the times I had stayed quiet, all the times I had accepted less to keep peace, and I understood the lesson too late. Silence teaches people how to treat you. The next morning I woke up different, not angry, just clear. I made tea and sat by the window. The sun came in slowly, and for the first time in a long while,
I didn't wait for a call that wouldn't come. I knew then the hardest truth was not what they decided. The hardest truth was realizing I had allowed myself to disappear from my own life.
After that day, I did not rush to fix anything. For the first time in my life, I allowed things to stay broken. I did not call my son. I did not explain myself again. I did not wait for an apology that might never come. Instead, I sat with the truth. And the truth was heavy, but it was also honest. For many years, I had believed love meant patience, that being understanding meant staying silent, that keeping peace meant accepting less. I thought if I stayed quiet long enough, someone would eventually notice my absence. They didn't. And that was the lesson I needed to learn. In the days that followed, I felt strange. Not sad all the time, not angry either, just awake. I noticed how often I had ignored my own feelings, how often I had said, "It's okay," when it wasn't, how often I had made myself smaller so others could feel comfortable. I realized something painful. No one told me to disappear. I slowly did it myself. One morning, I cleaned my room. Not because it was messy, but because I needed space to breathe. I folded old clothes. I found letters from years ago, photos of my son as a child. I sat on the floor and cried softly. Not the kind of crying that breaks you, the kind that washes you. That afternoon, my son called. I stared at the phone for a long time before answering. "Ummi," he said. His voice was unsure. "I didn't know how to talk to you," he admitted. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't defend myself. When he finished, I spoke slowly. "I don't need control," I said. "I only needed respect." There was silence. Then he said, "I'm sorry." It was not a perfect apology, but it was real. I did not rush to forgive. Forgiveness, I learned, is not a favor you give others. It is a process you allow yourself. I told him I needed time, and for the first time, I did not feel guilty for asking. I also spoke to my daughter-in-law, not with anger, not with blame, just honesty. I never wanted to interfere, I told her, but I still wanted to belong. She looked surprised. "I thought you preferred distance," she said. That sentence hurt, but it also explained everything. Silence had spoken for me, and it had said the wrong things. We talked for a long time that day, not to fix the past, but to understand it. I did not demand change. I did not beg for space. I simply stated my boundaries. "I want to be informed," I said. "I want to be asked." And then I stopped talking. Something changed after that. Not suddenly, not perfectly, but slowly. I was included in conversations again, asked for opinions, sometimes even disagreed with. And that felt good. Because being heard matters more than being liked. I also changed myself. I stopped waiting to be invited into my own life. I started visiting friends again, taking walks alone,
enjoying quiet mornings without expectations. I learned how to sit with myself without feeling lonely, and that gave me strength. One evening, I stood in the kitchen again, the same kitchen where I once felt invisible. This time, I felt present, not because others had completely changed, but because I had. I no longer needed permission to exist. I understood something important then. Family love does not mean losing yourself. Respect should not be optional. And silence should never cost you your place. I still love my family. That never changed. But now, I love myself too. And that made all the difference.
Life did not suddenly change the day I spoke up. There was no dramatic moment, no applause, no instant healing. The world stayed the same, but I did not. In the days that followed, I learned something important. Healing is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not rush. It simply shows up in small moments. Like the first morning I woke up without a heavy feeling in my chest. Like the first time I said no without explaining myself. Like the first evening I enjoyed my own silence. I began to notice how much energy I had spent trying to be understood. Years of explaining, years of adjusting, years of telling myself that patience meant love. But patience without respect slowly becomes pain, and I had carried that pain quietly for too long. Some days I still felt lonely. I want to be honest about that. Healing does not erase loneliness. It teaches you how to sit with it without feeling broken. I stopped blaming myself for wanting to belong. Wanting connection does not make you weak. It makes you human. I started creating small routines just for myself. Morning tea by the window, slow walks in the evening, writing my thoughts in a small notebook no one else would read. For the first time, my life did not revolve around waiting. It flowed. My family and I began speaking differently, not more often, not perfectly, but more honestly. There were still moments when I was not included, but now they no longer defined me, because my worth was no longer decided in their conversations. One night, I thought about all the years I stayed silent. I didn't feel anger. I felt understanding. I was doing the best I could with what I knew then, and that realization brought me peace. I learned that love should not require you to shrink. If being easy to live with costs your voice, the price is too high. Love should feel safe. It should feel warm. It should never feel like erasing yourself. There is a quiet strength that comes from choosing yourself, not loudly, not selfishly, but gently. It is the strength to say, I matter too. If you are listening to this story and feeling unseen, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not invisible. You are not asking for too much, and you are not wrong for wanting to be included. Your feelings are valid even if no one acknowledged them before. Sometimes family does not hurt us on purpose. Sometimes they hurt us because we never showed them where it hurt. Silence can protect relationships, but it can also teach others to ignore us. I no longer wait to be asked to exist. I speak when something matters to me. I step back when something costs my peace, and I no longer feel guilty for either.
Today, my life feels lighter. Not because everything is perfect, but because I am no longer carrying the weight alone. I learned to stand without leaning on approval. If there is one lesson my story leaves behind, it is this: you can love people deeply and still choose yourself. You can forgive without forgetting what you learned, and you can be kind without disappearing. I was still family, but now I am whole, and that is enough.